The brain woke up one morning and made a decision. Not a loud one, not the kind that comes with motivational music and a new journal. Just a quiet, tired decision. Something has to change. Because the brain had been trying to study for weeks, and every single time it sat down at the desk, something strange happened. The phone lit up, a notification, a scroll, a video that somehow turned into 45 minutes of nothing. And the brain didn't even enjoy it. It just couldn't stop. Sound familiar? Yeah, you felt this. That pull, that invisible hand that grabs you mid-intention and drags you somewhere easier, shinier, louder. Here's what the brain finally had to admit. It wasn't lazy. It wasn't broken. It was just trained. Trained by something that spent billions of dollars figuring out exactly how to keep it hooked. And the brain, smart as it is, had no idea it was even in that game. See, social media didn't win because it was useful. It won because it was engineered. Every like, every scroll, every surprise notification, those weren't accidents. They were carefully designed to trigger something ancient inside the brain, something old, something that was built for survival, not for a history textbook. The brain's reward system, the dopamine circuit, that deep, hungry part that says, yes, more of that, it was hijacked, and the brain just kept clicking. But here's where it gets interesting. The brain started asking a different question. Not, how do I force myself to study, but what if I just stole their playbook? What if studying could feel less like punishment and more like a game the brain actually wanted to play? Not because it was easy, but because it was wired the same way. Unpredictable rewards, small wins, a sense of progress, a little bit of mystery. That's the hook. That's always been the hook. Think of it like a slot machine. Stay with the brain here. A slot machine doesn't pay out every time. That's not a bug, that's the whole design. If it paid every pull, you'd stop after you got what you wanted. But when the reward is random, when sometimes you win and sometimes you don't, the brain goes a little crazy. It keeps pulling. It can't help itself. Now imagine that instead of spinning cherries, the brain was spinning flashcards. Instead of jackpots, it was getting the answer right, occasionally getting it wrong, occasionally surprising itself. Suddenly, the same circuit that got hooked on TikTok is lighting up for organic chemistry. Same brain, different game, same fire. The science is actually straightforward on this. Unpredictable, variable rewards activate the dopamine system more powerfully than predictable ones. The brain doesn't just want the win, it wants the possibility of the win. That gap between trying and getting it right, that tiny uncertain moment, that's where the addiction lives. And once the brain understood that, everything shifted. Here's the question the brain needs you to sit with for a second. When was the last time studying felt like something you chose, not something you survived? Think about that honestly. Drop "this is me" in the comments if that one landed somewhere real. Now, the modern problem. The brain lives in the most distraction-dense environment in human history. Every app, every platform, every device is competing for the same limited resource, attention. And attention is not infinite. The brain runs on a tank, and most days that tank is half empty before the first class even starts. By the time it's supposed to study, the brain has already spent its best fuel on content that gave nothing back. It's like trying to run a marathon after someone quietly drained your legs all morning. The brain isn't failing, it's just being outspent. So the first shift, and this one is unexpected, isn't about studying more. It's about making the brain want to come back. That's it, just come back. The brain decided to stop measuring sessions by how much it covered and start measuring them by how they ended. Did the brain stop while it still wanted more? That's the move. Stop in the middle of something interesting. Stop when the momentum is still going. Because that unfinished feeling, that open loop, that mild tension of, wait, I didn't finish that, that's the brain's brain pulling it back, voluntarily, hungrily. The same way a good series ends on a cliffhanger and suddenly it's 2 a.m. The second shift is about removing willpower from the equation entirely. The brain learned the hard way that willpower is not a strategy. Willpower is a resource, and like everything else the brain runs on, it depletes. So instead of asking, "Can I make myself study tonight?" the brain started asking, "What would make not studying feel harder than studying?" It changed the environment. It put the phone in another room, not turned face down, not on silent, in another room. It set up the study space the night before, so the brain woke up to an open book instead of a blank decision. It made starting effortless, because starting is the only part that actually requires activation energy. Once the brain started, it almost always kept going. Inertia is real. The first sentence is everything. Then the brain started breaking sessions into tiny, gamified pieces. Not study for 2 hours, that's a punishment dressed up as a plan. Instead, 10 minutes, one concept, one small test, check. Tiny cycle, tiny win, tiny dopamine, repeat. The brain started quizzing itself randomly, not in order, because order feels safe, but randomness keeps the brain alert. It started saying things out loud, explaining ideas to no one, because the moment the brain has to teach something, it realizes exactly what it doesn't know, and that gap is the most motivating thing in the world. It started building small streaks, not perfect ones, just consistent ones, because streaks create identity, and identity is stickier than discipline. Here's the part that changed everything for the brain. It stopped thinking of studying as something it did, and started thinking of it as something it was. Not, "I study sometimes," but "I'm someone who figures things out." That tiny reframe, identity over action, activated something quieter and deeper than motivation. Motivation fades, identity anchors. When the brain hit a hard chapter, it didn't ask, "Do I feel like doing this?" It asked, "What would the kind of person I'm becoming do right now?" And that version of the brain always knew the answer. The brain isn't perfect. It still gets distracted, it still loses a Tuesday to YouTube sometimes, but it no longer waits for the perfect moment, the perfect mood, the perfect version of itself to show up before it opens the book. It starts small. It makes the environment do the heavy lifting. It keeps the loop open so it wants to come back. It treats its own reward system like something worth understanding, not something to fight against. You have the same brain, literally, the same circuitry, the same dopamine machine that got trained on notifications and infinite scroll. That machine is yours. And it can be retrained, not by forcing it, but by feeding it the right signals, by making learning feel less like obligation and more like discovery, by designing your environment instead of just surviving it. If any part of this felt like the brain was describing your life, subscribe. Not for the content, for the version of yourself you're clearly trying to build. And if this one actually helps something click, hit like. Not for the algorithm, because that click is a small signal to your own brain that this kind of thinking is worth coming back to.